Hi all, welcome to i-tutor Academy. In today's session, we will start with the Unit 6, subsection 4 of MMPC 010, that is the marketing approach to demand measurement. And the vast majority of business decisions involve some degree of uncertainty, and managers seldom know exactly what the outcome of their choices will be. And one approach to reducing the uncertainty associated with decision making is to devote resources to forecasting. And forecasting involves predicting future economic conditions and assessing their effect on the operation of the firm. Frequently, the objective of forecasting is to predict demand. In some cases, managers are interested in the total demand for a product. For example, the decision by an office product firm to enter the home computer market may be determined by estimates of industry sales growth. In other circumstances, the projection may focus on the firm's probable market share if a forecast suggests that sales growth by exciting firms will make successful entry unlikely. The company may decide to look for other areas in which to expand. And forecast can also provide information on the proper product mix for an automobile manufacturer such as Maruti Suzuki Limited. Managers must determine the number of Swift versus Alto to be produced. In the short run, this decision is largely constrained by the firm's exciting production facilities for producing each kind of car. However, over a longer period, managers can build or modify production facilities, but such choices must be made long before the vehicle begin coming off the assembly line. Accurate forecast can reduce the uncertainty caused by this long lead time. An example, if the price of petrol is expected to increase and the relative demand for alto or compact car is also likely to increase. And forecasting is an important management activity. Major decisions in large business are almost always based on forecast of some type. In some cases, the forecast may be little more than an intuitive assessment of the future by those involved in the decision. And in other circumstances, the forecast may have required thousands of work hours and lakh of rupees. It may have been generated by the firm's own economist, provided by consultant specializing in forecasting, or be based on information provided by government agencies. And forecasting requires the development of a good set of data on which to be the analysis. A forecast cannot be better than the data from which it is derived. Three important sources of data used in forecasting are expert opinion, surveys, and market experiment. And what is expert opinion? The collective judgment of knowledgeable person can be an important source of information. In fact, some forecasts are made almost entirely on the basis of the personal insight of key decision markets makers. And this process may involve managers conferring to develop projections based on their assessment of the economic conditions facing the firm. In other circumstances, the company's sales personnel may be asked to evaluate future prospects. In still other cases, consultants may be employed to develop forecasts based on their knowledge of the industry. Although prediction by experts are not always the product of hard data, and their usefulness should not be underestimated, and indeed the insight of those closely connected with an industry can be of great value in forecasting. And methods exist of for enhancing the value of information elicited from experts, and one of the most useful is the Delphi technique. Its use can be illustrated by a simple example. Suppose that a panel of 6 outside experts is asked to forecast a firm's sales for the next year. And working independently, 2 panel members forecast an 8% increase. 3 members predict a 5% increase, and 1 person predict no increase in sale. Based on the responses of the other individuals, each expert is then asked to make a revised sales forecast. Some of those expecting rapid sales growth may based on the judgment of their peers, and present less optimistic forecast in the second iteration, and conversely some of those predicting slow growth may adjust their responses upward. However, there may also be some panel members who decided that no adjustment of their initial forecast is warranted, and assume that the second set of prediction by the panel include one estimate of a 2% sales increase, one of percent, two of 6%, and two of 7%, and the experts again are shown each other's response and asked to consider their forecast further. This process continued until a consensus is reached or until further iteration generate little or no change in sales estimates. And the value of the Delphi technique is that it aids individual panel members in assessing their forecast, and implicitly they are forced to consider why their judgment differs from that of other experts. Ideally, this evaluation process should generate more precise forecasts with each iteration. And one problem with the Delphi method can be its expense, and the usefulness of expert opinion depend on the skill and the insight of the expert employed to make predictions. Frequently, the most knowledgeable people in an industry are in a position to command large fee for their work as consultant, or they may be employed by the fee but have other important responsibilities, which means that there can be a significant opportunity cost in involving them in the planning process. And another potential problem is that those who consider themselves experts may be unwilling to be influenced by the prediction of others on the panel. As a result, there may be few changes in subsequent round of forecast. Next is survey. What is survey? Survey of managerial plan can be an important source of data for forecasting. And the rationale for conducting such surveys is that plans generally form the basis for future action. Example, capital expenditure budgets for large corporations are usually planned well in advance. This a survey of investment plans by such corporation should provide a reasonably accurate forecast of future demand for capital goods. And several private and government organizations conduct periodic surveys, and the annual National Council of Applied Economic Research, that is NCER survey of market information of household is well or recognized. Many private organizations like ORG, MARG, and TNS India conduct surveys relating to consumer demand across certain geographical areas. And if data from existing sources do not meet its specific needs, and FA may conduct its own survey. Perhaps the most common example involve companies that are considering a new product or making a substantial change in an existing product. And but with the new or modified products, there are no data on which to base a forecast. One possibility is to survey household regarding their anticipated demand for the product. Typically, such survey attempt to ascertain the demographic characteristic, example age, education, and income of those who are most likely to buy the product, and find how their decision would be affected by different pricing policies. And although the survey of consumer demand can provide useful data for forecasting, their value in highly dependent on the skill of their originators, and meaningful survey required careful attention to each phase of the process. Questions must be precisely worded to avoid ambiguity. The survey sample must be properly selected so that the response will be representative of all customers. Finally, the method of survey administration should produce a high response rate and avoid biasing the answers of those surveyed. Poorly phrased question or a non-random sample may result in data that are of little value. Even the most careful designed survey do not always predict consumer demand with great accuracy. In some cases, respondents do not have enough information to determine if they would purchase a product, and in other situations, those surveyed may be pressed for time and be unwilling to devote much thought to their answers. Sometimes the response may reflect a desire to put oneself in a favorable light or to gain approval from those conducting the survey. Because of these limitations, forecasts seldom rely entirely on result of consumer survey, and rather these data are considered supplemental source of information for decision making. And next is market experiments. What is market experiment? A potential problem with the survey data is that survey responses may not translate into actual consumer behavior. That is, consumer do not necessarily do what they say and they are going to do, and this weakness can be partially overcome by the use of market experiments designed to generate data prior to the full scale introduction of a product or implementation of a policy. To set up a market experiment, the firm first select a test market, and this market may consist of several cities, a region of the country, or a sample of consumers taken from a mailing list. And once the market has been selected, the experiment may incorporate a number of features, and it may involve evaluating consumer perception of a new product in the test market. And in other cases, different prices for an existing product might be set in various sites in order to determine demand elasticity. And a third possibility would be a test of consumer reaction to a new advertising campaign. And also, there are several factors that managers should consider in selecting a test market. First, the location should be of manageable size. If the area is too large, it may be expensive and difficult to conduct the experiment and to analyze the data. Second, the resident of the test market should resemble the overall population of India in age, education, and income. If not, the results may not be applicable to other areas. Finally, it should be possible to purchase advertising that is directed only to those who are being tested. And market experiment have an advantages over survey in that they reflect actual consumer behavior, but they still have limitations. One problem is the risk involved, and in test markets where prices are increased, consumers may switch to product of competitors, and once the experiment has ended and the price reduces to its original level, it may be difficult to regain those customers. And another problem is that the firm cannot control all the factors that affect demand, and the result of some market experiment can be influenced by bad weather, changing economic conditions, or the tactics of competitors. And finally, because most experiments are of relatively short duration, consumers may not be completely aware of pricing or advertising changes. Thus, their responses may understate the probable impact of those changes. So activity 2 is here based on this subsection. So please try to do it. It will help you for your and more understanding. Okay. And next is demand forecasting techniques. So first one is time series analysis. Regression analysis as described above can be used to quantify the relationship between variable. However, data collection can be a problem or if the regression model include a large number of independent variables. When changes in a variable show discernible pattern over time, time series analysis is an alternative method for forecasting future values. And the focus of time series analysis is to identify the component of change in the data. Traditionally, these components are divided into four categories, that is trend, seasonality, and cyclical pattern, and random fluctuation. So trend is a long term increase or decrease in a variable. Okay. uh, Time series of population in India exhibit an upward trend, while the trend for endangered species such as the tiger is downward. The seasonal component represent changes that occur at regular intervals. And analysis of a time series may suggest that there are cyclical patterns defined as sustained period of high value followed by low value, and business cycle fit this category. And finally, the remaining variations in a variable that does not follow any discernible pattern is due to random fluctuations. And various methods can be used to determine trends, seasonality, and any cyclical patterns in time series data. And next is trend projection. What is trend projection? One of the most commonly used forecasting technique is trend projection. As the name suggests, this approach is based on the assumption that there is an identifiable trend in a time series of data. And trend projection can also be used as the starting point for identifying seasonal and cyclical variations. And this is table 6.3 is here, hypothetical time series. sales data. So period number, quarter and sales. And statistical curve fitting, basically this involves using the ordinary least square concept developed above to estimate the parameters of the equation. And suppose that an analyst determine that a forecast will be made assuming that there will be a constant rate of change in sales from one period to the next, and that is the same sales will change by the same amount between two periods. And here S statistical, S denotes sales and T indicate the time period. So here is the equation, st is equal to S0 plus bt. Okay, and two parameters to be estimated are S0 and B, and the value of 0 correspond vertical intercept of the line, and parameters B is the constant rate of change and corresponds to the slope. Okay, and next is the interpretation of the equation is that the estimate constant rate of increase in sales per quarter. Okay, so that is 12.8 11 lakhs. And so similarly st minus 1 is equal to st minus 2, that is 1 plus g, and like that. So this is the further take logs and results. So equations are here, please go through your study material also parallelly, so it will more clear. And table 6.4 is the natural logarithmic of hypothetical time series sales data is here. And seasonal variation in time series data, a seasonal fluctuation in time series data are not uncommon, and in particular a large increase in sales for the further quarter is a characteristics of certain industries, and indeed some retailing fame make large amount of their total sales during the Diwali period, and other business activities have their own seasonal sales pattern. And electric companies serving hot humid areas have a distinct peak sales period during the summer months because of the extensive use of air conditioning. Similarly, demand for accountant service increase in the first quarter as income tax deadline approach. And a close examination of the data in table 6.4, so this is 6.4, and indicate that the quarterly sales increase are not uniformly distributed over the year. The increases from the first quarter to the second, and from the fourth quarter to the first tended to be small, and while the fourth quarter increase is consistently larger than that of other quarters. So that is the data exhibits seasonal fluctuations, and the pronounced seasonal variation can be cause serious errors in forecast based on time series data. Example also here. Okay, and the accuracy of the of the forecast can be improved by seasonally adjusting the data. Probably the most common method of adjustment is the ratio to trend approach. It use can be illustrated using the data 6.4 based on predicting equation. And 6.5 table is here, seasonal adjustment using ratio to trend method. Okay, so different methods are there. Seasonal adjustment can be improved forecast based on trend projection. So however, the trend projection still has some short coming, and one is that it is primarily limited to short term prediction, and exploitation much beyond the last data point. Okay, next is exponential smoothing. The trend projection is actually just regression analysis where the only independent variable is time. One characteristic of this method is that each observation has the same weight. That is, the effect of the initial data point on the estimate coefficient is just as great as the last data point if there has been little or no change in the pattern over the entire time series. This is not a problem, and however in this case more recent observations will contain more accurate information about the future than those at the beginning of the series. Example also here. And exponential smoothing is a technique of time series forecasting that gives greater weight to more recent observation. The first step is to choose a smooth constant. So where 0 is greater than a is greater than 1.0. And if there are n observations in a time series, the forecast for the next period, that is n plus 1, is calculated as a weighted average of the observed value of the series at period n and the forecasted value for that period, say that the same period. Okay, so please go through it. 6.6 is here for a table, forecast based on exponential smoothing is here. And next is choices of something constant, and any value of this could be used as smoothing constant. Okay, and one criterion for selecting this value might be the analyst's intuitive judgment regarding the weight that should be given to more recent data point, but there is also an empirical basis for selecting the value of this one. And remember that the coefficient of a regression equation are chosen to minimize the sum of the square deviation between observed and predicted values. The same method can be used to determine the smoothing constant. Okay. So here is a smoothing constant and sum of squared deviations. And evaluation of exponential smoothing also here. One advantage of exponential smoothing is that it allows more recent data to be given greater weight in analyzing time series data. And another is that as additional observation become available, it is easy to update the forecast, and three is no need to re-estimate the equation as would be required with the trend projection. And the primary advantage of exponential smoothing is that it does not provide very accurate forecast if there is a significant trend in the data. If the time trend is positive, forecast based on exponential smoothing will be likely to be too low, and while a negative time trend will result in estimate that are too high. And simple exponential smoothing work best when there is no discernible time trend in the data, and there are however more sophisticated form of exponential smoothing that allow both trend and seasonality to be accounted for in making forecast. Okay, so this is about today's session, and for next subsession we will discuss on next video. And for more MBA series, you just do like, share and subscribe our channel. Thank you so much.
i-tutor Academy presents IGNOUMBA Complete Syllabus Coverage Classes for individual students, semester-wise subject with online flexible timing. For more details, contact on +91 623 827 1885.